welcome to the Fitrus Friday interview, Samira. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me here.
No worries at all. So I thought I would start off this sort of very first Fitrus Friday interview whereby I'm actually doing sort of the interviewing with a conversation or a topic that I think is of massive interest to people who come from a similar background as us,
yes.
Right? So, and the subject of discussion was mental health in the Asian Diaspora Community, right? Now, before we sort of dive into the conversation in its depth, I'd be interested to know just if you could kindly just introduce yourself or just give a little bit about, your full name, where you're from, your background, what you do, just for the viewers to get to know you a little bit.
Okay. So my name is Sameera Rajani and I am a personal trainer by profession. I also work in the pharmacy as a healthcare assistant. So I have two jobs that I work part-time in, mainly with personal training being my main profession because that's what I am passionate about. And yeah, I'm 23 years old, so in my 20s, like trying to get out there as much as I can, trying to set up my own business, my own fitness whole kind of community with mainly training ladies from our Asian community, but not limiting myself to that. So trying to help anyone achieve their goals basically through all kind of nutrition advice and also like fitness, working in a gym, work at Pure Gym, so that really massively helps in terms of equipment and working out in the gym itself. So yeah, just generally that kind of stuff. I try and inspire people with fitness and that kind of stuff. So,
that's really good. So remind me, your sort of your business that you've set up was Fits and Fabs, is that right? Fit and Fab, yeah, that's right, I got that. So, and we'll sort of discuss about that perhaps more towards the end of this conversation today, but sort of the primary reason in terms of sort of inviting you on specifically is of course that you've got a sort of a lived experience of a mental health condition, right? Do you want to just have a sort of a brief look at that?
Yeah, so my mental health mainly kind of started taking over a lot last year when I was due to get married and that didn't work out. I ended up hurting myself physically and that kind of stuff, and I didn't really acknowledge it at the time. I just passed it off. I found it hard to speak to my family about it because I thought I'd just get judged, but obviously that was just me not being confident in them, so I just didn't think of it until when obviously I started working in a gym and realized that actually a lot of people do suffer from mental health issues and they have got help and it's not hard to get help. So because of that, I actually then reached out and asked my GP and stuff about all of this stuff, and I actually got put on medication because I think for me my personal experience was to do mainly with marriage, and I guess I still feel that I'm maybe not at that age where I want to get married right now. I think I still have a few more years before I do that. I need to look after myself first and get into setting up my business and then look into getting settled.
Yeah, I think that's a fair experience. I mean, you mentioned the fact that your sort of engagement breaking as it was one of these sort of push factors that led towards this. Would you say do you reckon this is something that is relatively sort of common in our community in terms of marital breakup? Does this happen often in the Asian community?
It does, but sometimes depending on what the situation is, it's not spoken about. Or sometimes girls are just supposed to carry on with it and sort it out. And that's why one thing is that having a short engagement period might influence that because you don't get enough time to know that other person. Not saying that short engagement periods are bad at all. I'm not like shutting down any of those traditions that people have, families have. But I think it just depends on what path you have taken in your life. I, for example, did not go to university. Now, when people go to university, they grow. They find their personality. They learn about themselves a lot. I missed in that experience. I went straight into work and straight into earning. So I didn't really get that time to do things that I would like to do, find a hobby, which actually I struggle now because when someone asks me, oh, what kind of things do you like to do? And I'm like, I don't know, because I've actually never explored it. Simple hobbies, like I know my friends, they collect these unique 50p coins that they like. Like there'll be a Peter Rabbit one and all that, and I don't take interest in that kind of stuff. My only interesting thing would be to watch series on Netflix and that kind of stuff. So
Sure.
That really pinches when I realize I don't have a hobby. I don't have something that I enjoy. So when you go to university, you kind of explore, you learn. Some girls, you'll see loads of girls go into creative stuff. They'll do calligraphy and painting and everything, and that is stuff that I like to do, but I've just never explored it.
Sure.
So I think when you miss that gap of being an adult, living in your own place, and cooking for yourself and everything, because you miss that, it makes a big impact on how you will be when you get engaged. So I guess just from going into working and then straight into getting engaged and getting married, I think that it depends on which route you have taken.
Sure.
That which engagement period will be suitable for you, and that's just how I feel.
Yeah.
But yeah, marital breakups and that kind of stuff does have a massive impact, but you just need to acknowledge it at the right time.
Absolutely. I mean, I just wanted to sort of add to what you've already said in terms of, and I don't know about whether you have the same experience or not, but there's a great pressure on especially women in our community, right, to get married at a certain age, right? And that if you don't marry by X date, right, there's an issue, right? And as a result, there's a lot of pressure on women in our culture from our racial background. And I just get the feeling that sort of undue pressure and the fact that that alongside the fact that, when marital breakups happen, it makes getting remarried or going back into a relationship even more challenging, that sort of adds to the sort of the stresses that are there.
Massively. And it's not even see, there's so many communities in the world. Yeah, the Asian community, Indian community, Pakistani community, just different ones. They have a really cultural influence in their lives, just generally. There is religion and then there's culture. Undoubtedly, most communities have the gossip factor, the spreading like wildfire. It makes a big difference, massive difference. So my wedding had gone to the date. Yesterday, in fact, would have been my first anniversary if I had got married. But my cards were printed out, my wedding dress was bought, everything, and then suddenly it gets cut off. It's a big impact, because for girls especially, they do tend to invest really quickly, because that's what they've been brought up with, that one day you're going to get married, you're going to have a husband, you're going to have kids, you're going to have your own house. So girls get invested so much quicker than, I can't say for guys, can't speak for them because I don't know how quickly guys get invested, but from my opinion, girls get invested more quicker. And just like that. So because of that, it impacts girls quite a lot more. The guy can easily get another relationship really quickly because it's just how it is in the culture. The girl has a mark on her, that's how people see it. And even if they don't talk about it, even if that doesn't happen, when they get engaged again, that relationship is going to be brought up again. People will try and say, oh yeah, but she was engaged to this person. It's just there, and they don't realize how much this affects someone's mental health. Tiny comments will trigger it so badly. So that's one thing that the community needs to be aware about.
Have you had any experience of that?
Yes, I have. Just generally, because obviously I was engaged again in New Year's Eve, and that obviously didn't work out. That was my experience of someone from outside sending a picture of my past relationship to my fiance at the time. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. Why do you need to send this to create problems and stuff? That was just one of my experiences, and it's not needed. If you have your life, live your life, don't interfere in others. And I think that's just one of the strong points that I feel, unless you think, that person is in danger, or you don't think that relationship is good for someone, because you know that person, then okay, intervene. But otherwise, you need to just keep to yourself, because I believe strongly in what goes round comes round. So do to others what you want them to do to you.
Yeah, of course, and I think that's a basic tenet of cultures, a basic tenet of faith, I suppose, in any faith. But I suppose what I really wanted to ask you around sort of your experience of having a mental health condition, right? So you've mentioned previously before we sort of had started this recording was that you've had moderate to extreme depression. Is that right?
Yes.
Or moderate to severe depression, right?
Yeah.
So how has that sort of manifested itself? And what does that look like, if you don't mind me asking?
So I think at the start I knew I had mental health issues. I knew that for a fact, but I think the way I've just grown up, like being with my family, sheltered, I've never had to take a problem on my own. If I had a problem, my family would help me out, or just, I would kind of ask them and they would support me in whatever the issue was. But when I was on my own, living on my own, or living with my friends out on my own, I would have to deal with those, but I would just pass them over my head. I would be, oh yeah, it's not an issue, not realizing that it is an issue.
So sort of burying it.
Yeah, I was shoving it under the rug, and I didn't realize that this is going to build up. There was a time when everything had started, 3 weeks, I didn't really address any issue that I had. And the third week, when just something happened, like the tears just flooded out. The whole day I spent crying because I didn't address my issues before. And then one thing happened and it triggered it, and I was in tears the whole day. I couldn't do my workout in the gym. I had an anxiety attack in that middle because everything just hit me like a truck. And, I just didn't address it at the time. And I think when I had my experience and I ended up in the hospital, I think from everything that was happening, I think then when the psychiatrist also told me that, you have moderate to severe depression, now actually going towards severe depression, then it became real. And I think now I'm trying to obviously cope with it, but it's scaring me because now it's actually a thing. Now I have a mental health illness and I've been diagnosed with it. And I think that makes it a lot harder. And I think that's one of the things people need to be made aware about as well, that when someone actually is diagnosed with it, then it's a more sensitive issue.
I mean, this actually really comes to mind, this idea of that I cover in quite a few of my mental health first aid courses that I run. And it's this idea of a stress container, right? So every single one of us as a human being has what's known as a stress container. And every hour, every day, every week, this container is filled up with the various stresses we have in our life. Yeah. And you quite eloquently mentioned that, your stress container was being filled and filled and filled without you necessarily releasing it, right, in a helpful way, or using a helpful coping strategy to try and release it. And eventually you had something that tipped the bucket and it all came flooding out, right? Quite literally. Yeah. And this can lead to all sorts of things, and in your case, it's led to a diagnosed mental health condition. So I suppose in terms of helping with the stress bucket, one of the things that I found to be really useful is having helpful coping strategies to sort of let out the water that is being built up, or the stresses that are built up. What are some of the helpful coping strategies that you've put into place that really help you?
I am still working on my coping strategies and stuff, but I have had loads of ideas that people have told me. So one of them is the medical side of it. I have my antidepressants, which help me quite a lot. I have to make sure that I'm having them every day, because not having them every day will, the imbalance of the hormones, everything, and it will affect. I'll have a super high day where I'm feeling absolutely amazing, which I had on Friday when I had gone out with my friends. We went to the beach and had a really good day. And then Saturday, Sunday, I had the lowest 2 days. It literally went from a 10 to a 1. And that is one of the things that I need to learn how to cope with as well. One of the coping ways that I have is to write a diary, which I write about, at the end of the day, I will write down how I felt. If I've had any harmful thoughts, so suicidal thoughts, if I had any of those throughout the day, then I'll write that. If I had those thoughts, what did I do? So normally the guideline that was that people resort to either alcohol or drugs or that kind of stuff. For me, it's different. Is if I tried to physically harm myself or tried to take extra tablets or whatever, just to put myself to sleep maybe. So I would write that down. Another thing is that I try to do is to have a gratitude diary. I'll write 3 things at the end of the day that I'm grateful for. Anything, that could be anything. It could be that I'm grateful that I woke up in a good mood today, just that kind of stuff. So every day I'll try and write that down, because then that reminds me that there have been positives in my day. And yeah, I think also one thing that a friend of mine, a colleague, told me yesterday was to acknowledge the little wins that I have, because that will make a big impact on how I view my whole kind of week, just generally. And just little wins, for example, like if I'm feeling really down and I'm feeling like in an unsafe mood, going to sleep instead of doing anything else that's harmful to me, that would be a win for me, because I acted differently compared to last time that I would have acted. And that's just kind of the things you do. Mindfulness, to calm down anxiety. There is an activity that you can find out about, is where you start at your feet and you concentrate and you go to each body part and then you go back down and try and see all your senses, focus on each part of your body, and that really helps to calm down anxiety and a panic attack. So just at the end of the day, basically reflecting on your day, seeing the positives, really, really helps, and just talking to someone.
I love the idea of a gratitude journal. I think it's something that's often talked about, but I think it's something that's rarely implemented. I've noticed, at least. I mean, I speak for myself. I started with a gratitude journal. It's now transformed to something completely different, where it's more letter writing, to be honest, to find out how well I've done. But I think it's very similar to what you've described in terms of expressing an understanding of how well your day has gone, what went well, what didn't go so well, but what did you do that sort of supported what didn't go well as well, and you've sort of written that down so that you can always refer
even
back
if you
to
don't, if you have a person that is struggling too, sending a message through WhatsApp to them and them sending you one back, because they might say, oh, I'm grateful that I did this today, and you're like, oh yeah, wait, even I also had this experience, so you would share. And it makes a big difference. It makes the other person feel that, you know, they're not alone, and makes you feel you're not alone as well.
I mean, having that circle of confidence, I think, goes a long way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it really does.
It
so
does.
we've talked about, you know, some of the helpful coping strategies. So you've talked about sort of medication. You've talked about gratitude journaling. You've talked about mindfulness, right? And you've also mentioned just there at the end about the circle of confidence, right? And how that sort of helped you along the way. In terms of specifically in our community, and you've sort of mentioned how you've got your own circle of confidence. Have you noticed anyone else within our community who has sort of a mental health condition generally? Is it quite common? Is it not so common? What are sort of your experiences?
I haven't noticed it as such when I'm in person there, because again, mental health is hard to notice, to see, because there's no symptoms for it as such, like physical symptoms. But since I have spoken about my mental health, I've had, I think, 2 people come up to me from our community actually saying, you know, you're so brave for speaking about your mental health, and, you know, I thought I was alone. But they weren't alone, and that's how we've been speaking. Now, their story is completely different to mine, but where I can help them a little bit and where they can help me with their opinions, you know, we bounce off each other, and it makes a big difference. So I think the fact that they've approached me shows that there are people who suffer with mental health issues. It might not be diagnosed as depression as such, but they do suffer, and it's whether they've acknowledged it or not. Simple things like even mums who've just had babies, they have I think it's called postnatal depression. And so that is one form of a mental health issue. But we've got so many mums in our community. Do we know who suffers from it? Definitely there must be at least 1 or 2 people, because it's very common, but we don't know about it. So I think it needs to be the community has to be a safe space for us to actually own up and say, yeah, I am suffering from my mental health issues, and, you know, I would like to tell people, so then if they suffer, they are strong as well, because mental health can kill if you don't speak about it, and that's very common. I'm really happy that the community, the scholars now, Amar Nakshwani and a lot more, they are actually raising awareness about mental health. They have been doing lectures on mental health, mainly because of obviously lockdown and, you know, how to cope. But they're speaking to an audience. They have a monologue kind of thing. They have one kind of size fits all for the whole community. But if they spoke to me separately about my mental health, how to cope with my type of mental health, and to someone else, it would make a big difference. Now, obviously, it's not practical for them to go to every single person, but I think there needs to be like some sort of a group that we have, a support network in the mosque. You know, whether it's like we have the youth committee, have a mental health committee, who actually check up on people, who will do questionnaires, surveys, how are you feeling, you know, how are you doing, all that kind of stuff. Even if they have someone who suffers from mental health and it's quite severe, if we have people who are trained in that, they can actually help and check up on that person, because one phone call makes a big difference. Not from the person who's suffering to make that call, from someone to call them. It makes a big difference.
And I think just sort of to add to this, and I think I'll put all the links in the description in this video down below, to various sort of resources or crisis resources that can be useful, both within our community and without as well, those that are outside our community. It's a fascinating thing that you've raised there in terms of there's two angles. So you've talked about the importance of scholars, and we look at this from obviously a Muslim background per se, but of course there are other faith communities out there who will have mental health issues within their congregants, right? But from a sort of there's a faith element to it. I suppose the other thing that you've mentioned there, which is really fascinating, is just this idea of having people who come together just to help with others or to support with other people, so having a specific committee around that. And again, I'll put some sort of description down there where people can actually have a look at some of the resources that are available. I just wanted to explore whether, and just briefly, just the final two things before we wrap up today, are there any resources that you've sort of used yourself when it comes to actually reaching out?
Okay, so there is this one actual place where I was not referred to, but I went to this place and they were obviously advertising for them. It's called Arthur Ellis.
Okay.
And they work kind of alongside the NHS, but it is for youth and young people. They try and reduce the waiting list, the waiting time that you have to get a therapist, to get a session booked in and everything, because they know that sometimes it takes months for you to get on that actual call. And luckily I've just had like my call today, and you know, now at least I know I'm near the top of the waiting list. But Arthur Ellis, they're trying to reduce that kind of thing down. So that is one really good resource that you can go to. Another one is Talk for Change, which is the one that I'm using. And IAPT is with the NHS, which they are actually doing talking therapy, and they can refer you to urgent care if they think that you are at danger to yourself or like that. So that is one of the good things that they have. Other alternatives is that if financially you are able to get a private therapist, because they mainly do it over the phone, you'd have once a week kind of calls, but that depends again on your financial stability, like if you can afford to obviously pay for those sessions.
Sure. That's really useful. Thank you, and I hope people will benefit and take advantage of that. Just this last thing before we sort of wrap up for today, in terms of, you know, you've talked about this idea of the fact that our community, and we talk about our because we are from the same community, right? We're both residents of Milton Keynes. We go to the same mosque, that type of thing, from similar cultural backgrounds. When we look at our community, right? There is this aspect within the Asian community of being judgmental, right? And we just spoke earlier off camera about how even just to the extent of even wedding dresses, you know, that they'll buy wedding dresses for, depending on how other people will judge you for it. So how do you think we as a community can reduce this sort of judgmental attitude?
Again, this is something that can't happen overnight.
Absolutely.
It's like changing a habit. And for example, personally, just on my view, from a family who didn't really acknowledge mental health, now they're really supportive about it. Like, as they've learnt about it, they've done research on their own to see how they can help me without me even asking.
That's lovely.
So that kind of stuff, step by step, trying to acknowledge that, you know, it exists. There are religious ways where you can try and reduce how you feel low, but the idea that Quran fixes everything, I'm not putting the Quran down at all. But if, for example, if someone broke a leg, you wouldn't tell them to recite Quran. You would tell them to get medical attention. So Quran helps to an extent. The older generation, they were taught Quran because it makes you feel good. Recite the Quran, it makes you feel good. sadly now the generation, people recite it because it's a routine.
Sure.
Yeah, recite it in Ramadan, recite at least once a day. It's a routine, so they don't have the same connection as the older generation do. My grandma will recite Quran, she'll feel like completely ecstatic, she'll feel really good after it, whereas some people will recite it because it's routine and it doesn't make a difference. So I think to first of all raise awareness that Quran is to make you feel better, recite it because we'll feel good afterwards. Put that instill that with your children, slowly, step by step.
Sure.
Try and get the judgment away from people. I myself, I'll be like, I'm scared of people judging me, but I have judged people myself. So being judgmental is part of the human nature, and it's slowly we need to try and take that away from us. There is one thing actually, Ummi Mirali Auntie had said, is that being the judge is only God's, his job to do. When that seat is empty, you can apply for that. So it's not we shouldn't be judging. So it's just one of the things you need to, if you have an opinion, see whether it's going to hurt that other person, or see if you say whatever it is it going to go around in Chinese whispers, is it going to get mixed up? Don't say it. Keep your harshful opinions to yourself unless it's for the benefit of that other person. Yeah. For example, if my makeup's wrong, tell me, because I don't want to be looking like not looking good in front of people. Sure. So that kind of thing is just common sense. It's not going to happen overnight. It needs to be kind of a thing that we need to work on ourselves.
And I suppose it starts with me, right? So you think about judgmental, it starts here,
it does.
Right? Before we can even start.
You can't, and it's just because years and years and years of community gossip spreading like wildfire, like simple things with what's happened in my life in the last 6 months. For sure, I know back in East Africa people know about it. For sure, people have asked about it. Yeah, which then makes it hard for me because I feel like if I go back for a holiday there, I don't want to be judged. They don't know anything about my life, but they just know that I've changed from what I was before. And I don't want to be judged. So then that stops me from enjoying my life and going back for a holiday to visit my grandparents. So just little things, just think, don't spread things if they don't need to be spread. Yeah? I think it just makes a big difference. Don't, try and find explanations for things you don't know reasons for. Things when I kind of was coming out with my mental health and stuff, there was a rumour that was spread that, maybe I've been possessed by a jinn, which was actually said.
Right.
So that, you can't diagnose me that I've been possessed by a jinn, a spirit.
No one can.
You can't diagnose me with that.
Yes.
That can't be an explanation.
Sure.
And it's not right either, because that can affect my mental. Am I actually possessed by a jinn? That can be very detrimental to my health. So, if you have an opinion, keep it to yourself unless it's actually necessary. Slowly but surely it will work. Don't spread things like wildfire. If you really want to gossip, keep it in your family. I mean, some people can't live without it. Keep it with your family. Write a diary if you want. Right? Keep it with yourself. You don't need to tell everyone what you've seen, what you think, like that about other people. You don't need to tell that kind of stuff. It's not good for your own spirituality itself in the first place.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think doing so just sort of helps. And I hope to build a better society, right? That's ultimately what we're after. But let me just round things off with just asking you this one thing around sort of other, resources or things that you may have come across which might have been sort of beneficial for not just yourself having lived with depression or living with depression, but other people who may live with the depression or want to try and get a better understanding of it.
Yeah. So with depression, there is obviously a lot of definitions, I guess, from different people. This is what depression is. I think one best way to explain depression is through this video called the Black Dog.
Yeah.
And that video absolutely hits the nail on the head.
Absolutely, yeah. Love it.
When I got told to watch that video, I felt so relieved. I was like, I thought I was the only one who felt like this, but it's not. Definitely watch that video. Definitely, have a look at it. Show your parents, show your grandparents, show your children, everyone, because it is actually the exact definition of depression. I think watching the video does the best thing. I can't explain it in words how good that video is.
It really is. It's fantastic. And you know what? We actually utilize those, or we used to in fact utilize those videos with our mental health first aid courses. So definitely, I'll put a link to the description for that video in the description for this video. But yeah, I mean, thank you so much. I really appreciate the fact that you've come in today to have this conversation. And you know what? Let's do this again.
Yes,
let's catch up another time. Obviously, mental health is a continuum. You're not either normal or you're nuts. You know, it doesn't work like that,
It's
right?
not,
It's
no.
a continuum. It works. It shifts every day. But I hope and I pray you manage to sort of come out of this. You manage to get yourself out. So just as we mentioned right at the beginning of the video, you're obviously a PT by profession. And you've got your own company as well, Fit and Fab.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about sort of Fit and Fab. How did it start, and what you do?
Okay, so mainly it started with me and my sister because she's also a personal trainer.
Okay.
And she lives in Africa, so she has done the Tanzania side of Fit and Fab, and I'm doing the UK side. So we came up with that name together, and we started like an 8-week weight loss program where you'd be given ideas of what to eat every week, and workouts that you can do at home with minimal equipment, and we saw a lot of results, and just generally we had quite a few ladies, and you get accountability and all that kind of stuff in that program. Alongside that, my Pure Gym side of it is Sameera Rajani PT, which actually works with the Pure Gym and train with one-to-one personal training sessions.
Brilliant.
So it comes under Fit and Fab, but we do personal training sessions at the gym. As well as online coaching. So I've also got into this app where I put all my workouts for my clients through my laptop, and it gets delivered to you on an app.
Amazing.
So you don't even need to have emails, paperwork, Excel sheets. It's all on an app, and I get notified if you've missed the workout. I get notified if you've completed it, and it's just an easy way to track. So it's just one of those things that technology helps a lot out with. So.
Yeah, especially during these pandemic times, right?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So if there's any links that you have in terms of your social media stuff, I'm sure you're on Insta. Is that right?
Instagram. It's just Sameera Rajani PT.
Lovely.
You can put it on the bio. There.
Yeah, brilliant. I'll put it in the video description.
That follow on there. If you have any queries, obviously, you can find my details on there, and that's a good way to communicate. And then we can also start with your journey. While I'm also working on my journey, so that fact that kind of similarity is there. We can go through the ups and downs together.
Lovely, and you're on that sort of exercise journey together.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely brilliant. And I'd love for you to come back in. At a different stage. Let's catch up again, and let's see how you've got on. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.